And now we're going to move to a different set of myths, and it's actually quite complex one. We're going to talk about the skills of the long-term care workforce, because quite often we are equating having paper education titles with skills. We're just saying that people who haven't had a lot of formal training are unskilled as a consequence. And we're also talking about care work as something that's not very nice to do, that's very negative. And I think we're completely missing out on some of the amazing qualities of the care workforce and of the beautiful nature of care work when it can be done under the right conditions. And with this, I'm going to introduce our speaker, a first speaker from this session. This session is going to be a bit of a conversation. Each of the speakers will have a 5-minute introduction of their position, and we're hoping to have at least 2 rounds. So we'll start with Kathryn. Kathryn has worked as a home health worker, and she's still working in the care sector, but she actually wrote a book called Every Kind of People, and she's going to talk us a bit about what's in the book.
Okay.
All yours, Kathryn.
Thank you. I wrote the book because I wasn't originally a care worker. I've been a care worker now for 5 years, and it's been by far the most rewarding thing I've done in my life, even though it's the least paid. And I wrote the book because before that I was a clinician, and I got a bit of burnout and I left that job, and I sat around at home getting a bit depressed, wondering what I could do, getting more and more anxious and less confident, until I thought the only thing I could do was get a job as a care worker. And that in itself is a really sad thing, is that I thought that was the one thing I could do above all, when I couldn't do anything else. And I think that's one of the myths that we have to bust, really, is that just anybody can do this job, because that's just not true. And what I learned was that it was incredibly joyful. I mean, it was hard work, could be dull, could be depressing, but also was full of joy and warmth and a reward. It was remarkably rewarding, and full of complex relationships and connections to people. And so I started to write about it, and in time it grew into this book, which has been received incredibly well and has won an award, which I'm staggered by. But I do hope that in some small way it will help shine a light on the fact that this job that we do does have skills, even though they're not very measurable. And it does take an enormous amount of responsibility, which I think is totally unrecognized. And I've never said that out loud before, because I always feel that I will upset other people doing low-paid work. But I have to say that as care workers, we take on an enormous amount of responsibility. We're going into the homes of very vulnerable people. We have to be completely trustworthy, very observant, very conscientious. It's a very important job to do. So yes, I'm pleased I wrote the book. I'm pleased it was well received.
Thank you, Kathryn. And maybe in the next round, I don't know if you want to read some quotes as well from the book. So we're going to go to the next speaker. The next speaker is Monica Vazquez. Monica is working in a very different way. She's working in Suara, which is a workers' cooperative operating mostly around Barcelona, I think, in Spain. So Monica, you've got your 5 minutes.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I will try to explain myself in English. Perhaps I will read a little bit because it's not my language, but I will try to share our experience. I have prepared a little presentation. Can I show Adelina?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Because it will help to follow the... Okay. Okay, are you watching the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so first of all, thank you for your invitation to participate in this event. For us, it's crucial to have opportunities like this to show the importance of the care work and care professionals. So our approach in this topic is directly linked to our cooperative model, we are convinced that cooperatives are not just a viable economical model. We prioritize the collective good and social responsibility, which is essential in today's world, and for us has a direct impact in the improvement and empowerment of our professionals. So I will try to share with you some insights about our visions and practices related to this topic. And I will start introducing our cooperative, Suara, just you know a little bit about what we do and how we work. So Suara is a worker cooperative founded in 2008 through the merge of 3 nonprofit social cooperatives in Catalonia with a history of more than 40 years. Recognizing the power of collaboration, these 3 cooperatives decided to join forces and create a stronger entity. Nowadays, our activity is very wide in the social field. We have around 300 services in all these areas that you can see here. 65% of our business is a wide package of services oriented to the elderly, from residential services where people live to home care services. We have another 20% about childhood care, from nurseries to highly specialized services such as preventive services, mental health, or violence protection. And also we have other services supporting people at risk of social exclusion, families, education, and also occupational services. So a wide range of different services. So it's important to focus on our mission. Our mission is to transform the social environment, and we work to improve people's lives through this range of different services. And we have four strong values. We are innovative. We work closeness. We are socially responsible and also participatory. So our cooperative's mission and values must be embodied by our professionals in their day-to-day activities, and this integrated understanding of our professionals' contribution is, for us, intrinsically linked to how we define our solutions to improve the value of care professionals. Some key figures. In 2024, we assisted almost 150,000 people, and we are around 5,500 employees. 1,800 of them, we are members, so we are owners of the cooperative. We employ workers in a wide range of care professions: social educators, social workers, early childhood teachers, and we have a lot of home care assistants or home care workers. We operate mainly in Catalonia.
Monica,
yes?
I think we're taking a little bit too long. I think we'll have to go a little bit. Yeah, so
I will focus now sorry, it's difficult for me to control the time.
That's okay.
For us, the value of care and social professionals in the context of an accelerating population aging, and also the increase of social needs, we are convinced that without care work, society cannot function. So probably, I think everybody agrees with us with that, but the fact is that this type of work is still invisible or undervalued. In our practical experience, when we as individuals cope personally with a situation that requires care work, physical or emotional or both, for us or for our relatives, then the recognition of the high contribution to improve people's life is undeniable and very appreciative. But the collective recognition of the work is still a pending issue. To perform this work in home care, in residential care homes, professionals put in practice every day different soft and complex skills, such as empathy, emotional management, decision-making in critical situations, communication, responsibility. So it's a job that requires training and specialized abilities. And a lot of professionals have acquired and trained these skills in a practical way, learning by doing. For us, social recognition is strongly tied to working conditions, and this is also a pending issue. So we have to improve salaries, we have to raise salaries to ensure stable contracts, to organize better shifts, to adequate staffing ratios, and also improve training for specialization of care work. And at last, just this, okay, I'm sure that will appear later, feminized type of work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will come back a bit to the solutions and what we can do to change this as we move with the conversation. And apologies for cutting you short, but we want to make sure we have a good discussion throughout. Our next speaker is Barbara de Roit. And Barbara is going to reflect on some of her comparative work and some of the work she's done in the past. All yours, Barbara.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation. So the things that I would like to say, first of all, they resonate, well, what I heard so far resonates a lot with the things that I would like to say. So that's very interesting. And what I'm going to tell you comes from basically three types of research, three different projects or types of projects. One is a Italian national research project on the quality of working life of care workers in residential care facilities in Italy. Another project is a Horizon Europe project, which it's called Let's Care, which compares 7 European countries. And we are at the beginning, halfway, let's say, through the project. And then there are some reflections that come from previous work that I did on live-in migrant care workers, especially, but not only in Italy. So I was thinking that what I heard from Monica and Kathryn so far resonates a lot with what we found through our interviews with these workers in residential care facilities in Italy. You have to imagine that the Italian residential care setting is not so wide, not so big. It's a small sector in a way. And it is not considered as the worst that you can get in care in Italy. Usually you do have a working contract. There isn't so much gray labor as there is, for instance, in the in-home care workers, and so on and so forth. And what we found throughout our interviews is that there is a very, very strong sense of being crucial for the life of the people that are being cared for and for their well-being. And there is a very strong pride that is expressed by these care workers in our interview. So their job makes sense to them. It is very important to them. It makes sense, and it keeps them, it keeps them alive. It keeps them feeling that they're doing something important for themselves and for society. At the same time, they express very strongly the idea that they do not feel recognized. They do not feel recognized by their colleagues, whom they do not really call colleagues because they are the superiors. And that means the management or other professionals like nurses or more, so to say, specialized care workers. And they do not feel recognized by the public in general. They often have conflicts with family members of the residents, and the ones that with whom they have problematic but still significant relationships are exactly the people that they care for. So when they analyze when we try to analyze together with them this idea, this mismatch between doing something that is so important on the one hand, but also doing something that is not being recognized, what came out is a little bit the following. What they say is, well, we are doing here two types of things. We take care of the people, we take care of their hygiene, we make it possible for them to get up, to get out of bed, to go back to bed, to eat, to be clean, and so on. And this is, of course, very important. But this is the minimum that we can do. This is, the least that can be done. The second thing that we do is we make people feel safe. We make people feel secure. We make people feel loved, important. And we do that through other things that are holding hands, chatting, joking, making a cup of tea. These are skills, they say. These are very important skills. And it's really what counts. And it's really what gives sense to what we do for ourselves and for the other people. But we do not have the time to do that. We do not have the time to do what counts. And we do not have the time to do what matters, what makes a difference, because we are, the organization, the resources, shortages, understaffing, and all that. And those skills, those relational skills, we cannot exert, we cannot use, we cannot implement, we cannot make them real. And this means that these organizational conditions are transforming something that would be a very rich and skilled work in a job that is much, much less skilled and therefore much less recognizable. And what I find interesting, if I still have 1 minute, Adelina, I'm looking at you, or not? Is it done? Is it gone? Oh, okay.
Quick minute.
What I find interesting is that I started doing research not on these types of workers, but on the badanti, so the live-in, especially migrant care workers in Italy, about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, something like that. And back then, among these workers, these live-in care workers who have also very bad employment conditions because they are domestic workers, they very often have no contract, very low social protection, and so on. Well, back then, what they wanted to do, if you ask them, what would you want to do next? Would you want to stay in this job or would you want to change? They would answer, I want to go and work in a nursing home because that's a real job. And this is no longer the case. So we have seen that transformation. And by the way, the work that these live-in migrant care workers do, it's mostly migrants, not only migrants, is also extremely complex and extremely skilled because they have to deal with very difficult situations. They take care of older people that are in very high need of support because of multiple conditions and so on. And they do it alone, under a lot of uncertainty. They do everything from cooking to cleaning the house to giving medications, basically. And they have to manage the relationships with the older person, with the relatives, with the services, and so on. So it's a highly skilled job that is totally not even seen as long-term care work. If you ask stakeholders in Italy and you ask them what is long-term care workforce, they totally take this out. They do not even see it as such.
Thank you, Barbara. And I think that's a very helpful reminder of the big differences that are within the sector. Our next speaker is Pat Armstrong, who has done so much to improve the work, or at least to try to improve the working conditions in Canada, and has got a long trajectory in this area. So Pat, all yours. 5 minutes as well. And you're muted.
Get my mic on.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to say ditto and pass on to the next one because Barbara has covered much of what we have seen in long-term care as well. Because how the skills are defined, acquired, assessed, rewarded, and employed are matters of debate for sure. And there's no automatic relationship between what the individual knows and applies, and the formal education they have, or how the job is defined in written documents. Nor do the skills required formally necessarily encompass all the worker needs to know to do the job effectively or actually applies. Skills, of course, are shaped by gender, power, context, technology, managerial strategies, as Barbara was just pointing out, and time and values. In our research, primarily focused on long-term residential care, we assume that all work done in care homes is essential to health and requires skills. And as we saw in our ethnographic studies of care homes in 6 high-income countries, how exercising those skills could bring joy to both those who provide care and those who need care, as Kathryn told us at the beginning of this session. I have some examples and I could come back to them, but I think one of the most important ones is the book we wrote called Wash, Wear, and Care, which is in the importance of clothes and laundry in long-term care, an area often forgotten, but is very important to dignity and skills. Anyway, the skills required are changing daily and even hourly, reflecting both the increasing frailty of the residents and the irregularity of care. Yesterday, Mrs. Smith loved peas. Today, she can't swallow them and has to be convinced she can swallow them when they're mushed up, for example. So much of this work gets dismissed as being what any woman can do, even sometimes by those who do it. I'm so often told that our grandmothers used to do this work without formal training, forgetting that my grandmother never dealt with a catheter and she was a lousy cook. We need to bust the myths about the skills that are in fact required, making them not only visible but valued, as we heard just a minute ago. This is particularly the case when many of those skills are about recognizing that care is a relationship that requires constant nurturing in the part of both those who provide care and those who need care. New managerial strategies, as Barbara was reminding us, focused on monitoring and measuring, as well as on reducing care to a series of tasks, mean that what counts is what can be counted. It's hard to measure a smile, a sigh of pleasure, or the dignity that can result from being dressed in your familiar clothes. Meanwhile, care time is being reduced to the absolutely essential, again, as Barbara said, defined often in medical or survival terms, ignoring both the skills and the time required. And that's why people are leaving, because they can't do or apply their skills. Applying skills can bring joy to both those who provide and those who need care. To do so, we need to make them visible and valued, as we've already heard 3 times, by ensuring that there's time to apply the skills and by ensuring decent pay that recognizes those skills, by providing continuing education, and perhaps most importantly, by creating the conditions that allow the autonomy needed for both individuals and teams to apply their skills, remembering that the conditions of work are the conditions of care. And I look forward to the next part of our discussion, and I hope I kept it under my 5.
I think you did. Thank you very much. And we're going to go to Kezia Scales, who is joining us despite being a holiday in the US. So thank you so much. And she works for PHI, which is an organization committed to promoting quality direct care jobs. So all yours, Kezia, your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And it is an honor to join this event and to be part of this panel. And I think, like Pat, I will also say ditto to everything that's already been shared, and really, I think just kind of underscore and reinforce some of these key themes across all of our work. So as Adelina mentioned, I work for an organization called PHI, a national organization here in the United States. And everything that we do at PHI, and so everything that I do in my work, is premised on the understanding that quality jobs and quality care are indivisible, meaning that the person-centered care that we all seek for our loved ones and for ourselves relies on better recognition of the hard work that it requires to provide that care. And just on a personal note, I have been studying and advocating for and with direct care workers in long-term care since 2008. And I can say that date precisely because that's when I was hired into my first research job, which was to conduct an ethnographic study of dementia care. And that study opened my eyes to the importance, the incredible importance of this work. I was hired along with 2 other field researchers, and we each did the required amount of training, which was minimal, put on the uniform, and went to work as members of the team in 3 different dementia care settings. And our goal was to gather insight through daily practice about the challenges and rewards of this work and what might be needed from a workforce perspective to enhance person-centered care. And it was such a privilege to observe and experience firsthand the complex, we've heard this several times on this panel already, the complex constellation of skills that direct care workers bring to their work. And to see and understand how much that labor matters to the well-being of the individuals that are being cared for. And that study ignited a determination in me to bring more attention to and better recognition of this essential and skilled work. And so fast forward to my work at PHI. Here at PHI, we have a project called the Direct Care Worker Story Project, which aims to elevate the voices and experiences of paid caregivers. And I had planned to share a quote from one of the direct care workers who's participated in that project. And it will sound now, again, it's sort of going to reinforce the themes that we've already heard, but I'm going to share it because I think it is worth saying this more than one time in more than one different way, and particularly hearing directly from those who do this work. So the quote I want to share is from someone named Crystal, who is a hospice nurse aide. That means in the United States, someone who's certified to provide direct care at the end of life. And this is what Crystal says about her work. She says, I understand that many people think of a CNA, that's her job title, as somebody who just goes in and maybe gives somebody a bath or a shower. But for me, being a CNA is much more of a nurturing and giving role. My focus is less on someone's diagnosis and more on getting to know them as a person and figuring out how I can make their day the best one possible while providing the care they require in the care plan. I also report any signs of declining health to the nurses. I love my patients with all that I have, but I prepare myself to let go when their time comes because that's just the nature of my job. And I think in this brief synopsis, Crystal captures so well the different competencies that this work requires. She needs to know someone's diagnosis and to know when and how to communicate with clinical partners. She needs to know what care someone needs and how to provide it. And she needs to build a relationship with the person in order to adapt their care in the moment to make any particular day the best one possible. And she needs to be able to let go and move efficiently onwards to the next person that requires her care. And yet we have this panel today, we're here today we still need to bust that myth that these are low skill jobs. And there are so many interconnected drivers and consequences of that myth. And to name just a few real quick, and again, reinforcing what's already been said, direct care jobs are fulfilled primarily by women and people of color and disproportionately by immigrants here in the United States and in many countries around the world, which reflects structural inequities that define how these jobs are seen and valued. Despite the complexity of this work, training is often minimal or even non-existent, and there are few opportunities for workers to build out their knowledge, skills, and responsibilities over time. Compensation remains stubbornly inadequate. And as just one illustration, here in the United States, our research at PHI has shown that median wages for direct care workers are lower than median wages for all other occupations with similar entry-level requirements in every state in the country, meaning that it makes more sense financially to choose jobs in other sectors like retail or food services than to be called to care work. And direct care workers remain at high risk of occupational injuries, stress, and burnout. All of that contributes to high rates of turnover and even greater pressure on those who remain in this workforce. So all of that is to say that direct care work is under-recognized and undervalued relative to the importance of this work for every individual and family receiving care, and for our health and long-term care systems more broadly, and for our labor markets and economies overall. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And actually, thank you all. We've done really well with the first round. You've all stuck to time. And Monica, you didn't have the chance to talk to the others before. So apologies for not letting you know a bit more about the format. So we're going to go back now to Kathryn, and we want to think a bit about what would make a difference to improve how care work is experienced by people working in the sector from your perspective, and then the others will also answer this question. What can we do about this?
Well, I think that just being here is a joy, because I think that as a care worker on the front line, we have absolutely no idea that anybody else is thinking about this. And I think that we do need to connect better with our work, you know, between the managerial sectors and the workforce itself, to make them feel more supported and cared about. I just felt so, I didn't feel cared for at all in any way by the companies that I was working for. Obviously, I think that we should increase wages because of the responsibility that's undertaken. And I can't find another job in the UK that pays less than a home care worker, which I find extraordinary. I think also we need to change the vocabulary around care. We need to talk less about wiping bottoms, making tea, and talk more about dignity, hygiene, toileting, personal care, and talk about it in a more professional way and challenge people that don't talk about it in that way. I think we need to promote it more to young people and try to provide some pathways through care that demonstrate that you can have a career in care that's rewarding and works. I mean, they're just a few of my suggestions. It's difficult to know, but I mean, we do have to change it somehow. There's certainly, I feel, especially in the beginning, there's a shame that comes with being a care worker that really puts people off and is hard to live with. And also, of course, I think the other thing that was raised that I hadn't thought of is the complexity of care now that we have to provide is increasing all the time with the aging population. And even in the last 5 years, it's become increasingly complex. So again, another thing that needs to be recognized.
Thank you so much. We're now going to go to Monica. And Monica, you're from the perspective of working in a cooperative, do you think that makes a difference? And how can an employer help improve the quality of work and the quality of life of the people working there?
So yes, I'm convinced that working in a cooperative is a difference. So thinking about solutions, I think that one of the things it's important is that in a cooperative model, you are in a collective project. So you learn with others, you learn from others, you achieve better outcomes. Sometimes this work is it's a loneliness work. You are alone at home, but when you know that you have some colleagues and you are part of a team, or you are part of a community of professionals, that it's something that care workers are, I think, they value very much, and it's really a support, because the situation that they live at work are not easy ones. So there are some emotional and complex moments. So to have a team, to have team managers and superiors that support you, I think that it's really something very, very important. In our case, we have this, we are convinced that it works better than other companies that are competing with us in the market. And I think our professionals are more committed, and they sense that they are more, they belong to a collective project. That is very, very important. And I also think that it's very important to continue improving education and training on skills. So, for instance, we have a program of improving digitalization skills that now are very necessary. Sometimes this type of workers, they don't have the possibility to improve their skills. So we have developed a program. Also, it's in a collective project, you have the possibility to implement mentoring programs. So experienced workers guide and support the new workers. And it's a win-to-win initiative. And also in our case, we are launching different innovation programs to introduce technology in the long care field. And what we do is that professionals participate in the design of these solutions. So they are part of, because they are they know the better what happens every day at work, what are the difficulties with the people they attend. So when we innovate with the participation of care workers. And for them, it's very important because it's a way also to gain confidence, they have value, so they know they can contribute with their experience to make things better for the future. So it's also something very important. And the last one thing that I want to say is that it's very important to continue working on visualizing and recognizing in the for the citizens and the society. I think Kezia has said that before, but we try to share experiences, communicate through social media, real stories to show the skills of these professionals and the responsibility that this type of work involves. And also, we are very strong trying to influence through our sector representative platforms to demand higher public investment to improve the infrastructures and the services, and also to boost government strategies to put care in the center of the public policies. So we try to work a lot in this field because we are convinced that it's so this type of work is essential and very, very important, and it will be every day is more needed because there are increasing necessities.
Thank you so much, Monica. Barbara, so thinking about the solutions, what can we do?
Oops, what can we do? Yes. Well, of course, there is a lot that can be done, let's say, at the organizational level in terms of recognition, in terms of the way work is organized, what is expected, and so on and so forth. But I don't know, I would like to move a little bit and try to foster a little bit more systemic reasoning in this sense. This comes mostly from the European Cooperative project that we are developing, that we are implementing. We have seen in this first part of the research that the way it's an intertwinement of different factors, and also not only of long-term care policies, but of different policies and regulations that really make a difference. First thing is there a long-term care field? Does it exist as such in a country? Whether or not there is a long-term care field makes a big difference in terms of recognition of care work. In many countries, there is a split. Long-term care doesn't exist, and there is a split, very clear split between healthcare and social care, and long-term care is a little bit in between that. This is typical in Southern European countries, but also Eastern European countries. And in that case, tend to have the healthcare system that is much more recognized than the social health care system, which means different levels of wages, different level of qualifications, different types of employment contracts, and so on and so forth. And you can also have different other types of other sources of fragmentation or segmentation. So in some countries, whether you work for a profit, non-profit, or a public organization, you have different employment and working conditions. So the professional pathways are very diverse depending on the subsector where you work. Funding makes a huge difference, who gets the funding and why and how, etc., etc. So basically, what we see is that there are countries where the labor force in long-term care is more unified. It's also more visible. It's more integrated. It's easier to think about policies about that workforce because the stakeholders are, organized in a much more unified, coherent way. Whereas, and that's typical, for instance, in our countries, in the countries that we're looking at, that's typical of Denmark, for instance. And to some extent, the Netherlands. It's the usual suspects in a way. The Nordic countries, the Netherlands to some extent, whereas all the other countries have relatively high, to different degrees, but a relatively high degree of fragmentation, which means that there are a lot of cleavages within the labor force, the care labor force, which also implies invisibility, divides, and inequities within the labor force. So that's one thing. And the second thing that I would like to say is in relation to that as well, is that there is this emphasis on professionalization as a way to recognize care work and as a way to improve working and employment conditions. But we have seen in this project, we have tackled the problem from the point of view of meanings. What does professionalization mean in these different contexts? And what we find is that in every country, there is this idea among policymakers, stakeholders, and so on, that professionalization is very important, but they do not mean the same thing. They absolutely do not mean the same thing. So in countries like Denmark and the Netherlands, where workers are already recognized professionals and have relatively well-protected jobs, what professionalism means is autonomy. It is flexibility and freedom to organize their work without too much management control. And what they're struggling with is the issue of negotiating this professionalism and this autonomy with empowered users. That's the type of debate that they're having. Whereas in the other countries, the situation is completely different. For instance, in Spain, what we found is that there is a very strong attempt on the policy side to transform a sector that is suffering from precariousness, from a lot of employment problems. And professionalization here becomes actually a synonym of formalization. So it's the struggle to acquire certifications, stable contracts, employment and social protection, which is of course important, but in a context with relatively low resources, this may also increase rigidity and therefore barriers and therefore shortages and therefore again a sort of vicious circle. In Austria, which is a different case again, there has been a quite strong process of academization of a part of care professions, the part that relates to nursing care and not personal care. And the shortcomings that they're experiencing here is a sort of distancing from the core relational elements of care professions. So the ones who are being professionalized in the sense of super specialized are also, moving away from direct care. They become managers in a way of care, or they also do very specialized things, which brings them away from that relational aspect that is so important. And finally, in countries like Italy and Portugal, where you have this very strong divide between healthcare and social care, Professionalization is perceived as the acquisition of skills that are typical of healthcare, because healthcare is the good thing. It's the professionalized care. So we need to become healthcare professionals. And this, again, is a problem because it does not recognize that basic value of care as such. So my impression based on this work is that what we would need to do is to rethink together what we mean by care and what we mean therefore by care work, which is not obvious across countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much also for bringing this comparative perspective of the different debates and the different situations of different countries. And now we're going to go to North America. So for a perspective from Pat and then Kezia. Pat, you're muted.
And I'm trying to keep my sound off because I'm afraid the phone will ring. I should have mentioned, I suppose, that for a decade we had funding for an international interdisciplinary team that studied care homes in 6 countries. We would take an international interdisciplinary team into a long-term care home for over a week in each of the countries in our project. And I very much agree with what Barbara said. We called it an international a search for promising practices because context matters so much. And with Monica on this question of getting the support from other workers is being undermined by many of the processes that Barbara's talking about, including what we saw in all 6 countries, Norway, Sweden, Germany, the UK, the US, and Canada, was this move between part-time and casual and self-employed workers that is really separating workers from each other, as well as this professionalism, the division of labor that is happening in many of them. I should say our project was in partnership with all of the major unions in Canada, and the long-term care is heavily unionized in Canada, not so much in the United States or in the UK. And we also had a partnership with one of the not-for-profit employer organizations, as well as with some community organizations. And that too helped us cover some of these distances that Monica was talking about earlier by working with these various groups. I think that has been very important. And the autonomy that I raised before becomes somewhat easier to fight for in the cases when there are unions present. Barbara raised earlier too, I think, the question of staffing levels. You don't have time to do any of this stuff without enough people there. And one of the things we've been documenting is the unpaid work done even in these unionized workplaces, because that women won't leave or go to have lunch if the work hasn't been done yet. They can't because of what used to be called compulsory altruism, which I think is also absolutely critical in terms of moving ahead. So I think requiring regular employment has to be a top priority along with staffing levels so that people do have real jobs with real pay. And with another issue that keeps coming up is scheduling, and to have some kind of say and control over the scheduling is also really important to develop these relationships and to handle, of course, all of the other responsibilities that women have. And finally, an area that I've done a lot of work in is pay equity. And we've made some really significant gains especially in Canada, using pay equity as a strategy. They've done so in Sweden too, where I've done some work as well on this issue. And it really, skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions are what we're talking about, and their recognition and their rewarding, but also their reorganization, which is why I ended by saying that the conditions of work are the conditions of care, but they're also the conditions on recognizing and being able to have the autonomy to apply those skills that are so critical.
Thank you, Pat. And Kezia.
Thank you. Once again, I want to really agree with everything that has already been said and probably repeat it to some extent. But I wanted to answer the question about solutions by suggesting a couple of cross-cutting principles for thinking about solutions to what are fairly wicked problems around the workforce and long-term care. And one principle I would say is that solutions must be grounded in a commitment to improving job quality for care workers, for paid care workers, such that we stay focused on these workers in their own right and on what it takes to support and strengthen and stabilize this workforce overall, rather than only seeing direct care workers as the means to an end of care delivery, which often does happen, not in the context of this conversation, but in other conversations. And of course, the care matters, and that's why we're all gathered here today as well. But so too do the people who provide that care. And at PHI, we have developed a framework based on experience and evidence that we call the 5 pillars of direct care job quality. And I wanted to offer that because what it captures or aims to capture is that direct care job quality rests on a combination of intrinsic and extrinsic factors. So one pillar is fair compensation, and it's essential. Livable and competitive wages and benefits, stable schedules, etc., are essential. And so too, the second pillar is competency-based, adult learner-centered, entry-level and ongoing training opportunities. And meaningful supervision and support on the job as another pillar. And respect and recognition for this work, which we've been talking about throughout this hour. And as a 5th pillar, real opportunities for career growth and progression. And because this framework shows that job quality is multifaceted, I think it really highlights how many different angles and opportunities there are for intervention and improvement. And the other principle, though, is that we need to envision holistic, comprehensive solutions to the extent possible versus more one-off piecemeal type solutions. And I offer that because in many cases, we find in these conversations that people are looking for the answer or the solution. So someone will argue that if only we could raise wages, we would improve workers' well-being and solve the workforce crisis. And someone else will argue that it's not about the money. People are called to do this work and just want to be seen and valued. Or someone will say that we just need to find the right people to do this work. It's about personal attributes and fit. And others will say it's training that matters to really strengthen and support workers in the workforce. And I really think, and we've heard it throughout this conversation today, that it's a case of both and all the way down the line. Yes, direct care workers deserve better recognition, and they must be able to pay the bills and support their families. Yes, some people are more suited to caregiving work than others, and we need to prepare them equitably through training to succeed in this difficult work. And I think the last point that I would like to offer is that we need to be learning from one another, which is why events like this and the Global Observatory are so important, because as I say, long-term care challenges and long-term care workforce challenges are so deeply rooted, and they're so recognizable within countries, across countries. They're nearly universal. And yet there is good work, good thinking, good innovation underway. There are good efforts to try to resolve these challenges. So we really do need to be coming together to bust the myths, but also to envision and realize the alternatives, sharing what we know and amplifying the progress that is being made.
Thank you so much, all of you, for these interventions. I'm going to abuse because we still, for the people for the next session, we're running 3 minutes late, so we are going to take the 3 minutes. And I wanted to invite Kathryn, if you want to come back. And there's quite a few things I've heard here that really resonated reading your book, and one I'm going to mention this, is the fact that I think so many of the hours you did were unpaid as part of your job, because when you found the situation, you just dealt with it, whatever it was. So I'd like to hear a bit from you what you feel after these discussions.
I feel really heartened that what you were talking about was recognized in this discussion, in that we provide two types of thing, really. There are two facets to it. There's the practical things, but there's also the fact that we make people, we help them maintain their personhood and their connection with the world. Can I read you a little bit about that? Would that be all right? Okay,
Yes,
so this is just serves to illustrate the connections that come about and what care gives you back when you do the job, and how important it is to uphold personhood of people. They told you that he used to love to garden. You're no gardener, especially not flowers. You've never really seen the point of growing them. Vegetables, maybe. At least they're useful. You ask him about gardening, and he tells you that he hasn't done that since his wife was alive, before he moved into this flat. Not vegetables, flowers. When he talks about flowers, he makes them sound like every favourite thing you ever lost and wished you could find again. So the next time you're due to wheel him out to the shops, you arrive 10 minutes early, take a detour through the local park and sit, him in the wheelchair and you on a bench in front of the municipal flower bed. Sitting there with him, you notice the sound of laughter, the sharpness of shadows, the susurration of the trees, how the wind-blown birds look like so many crooked stitches in the sky. The outing becomes a regular part of your time together until the day the lift breaks down. You feel relieved not to be put to the effort of finding his outdoor clothes and getting him into the wheelchair on that day. But when you get back, he looks so miserable that it makes you feel guilty for feeling that way. The next week, the lift is still broken. You help him to the balcony door, open it, and look out together at bits of rubbish, a broken chair, and several pots of dry dirt and dead twigs. He tells you he especially likes the scent of roses and the colour of geraniums. You remind him that roses take ages, but maybe geraniums are possible. The next week, you bring geraniums and plant them together, and over the weeks the geraniums blossom, and even though he's almost blind, he can see them because they are so bright. He's right, the colour is amazing. You never noticed that before, when geraniums were just things in pots lining the front doorstep that were a bother to water. But now, when you examine them together, geraniums have become exquisite, miraculous.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful way of finishing this session. And I'd like to thank you all for your really thoughtful contributions and how you have also spoken and built on each other. So my big appreciation, and we're now going to move to the next session.